so it's been really good, and I'm hopeful that this will kind of dovetail and mesh well with that. And this is not the title that's in the little brochure of the talk, because I thought about it and I thought, I'm not give a bad tour. And it's not visitor directed, it's visitor influence, so a little bit of a change. My name's Dale Jones. I have a company called Making History Connections, and I work with museums to help them figure out how to connect with visitors, whether it's through design of live interpretation, tours, museum theater, anything live, or through evaluation, help them understand what's going to resonate with the audience. I do projects all over the country. And how many of you here give tours? How many are more responsible for the design of the tours? All right, so this looks like about two-thirds, almost two-thirds give the tours, about a third are responsible. How many of you give the tours that you design? I just wanted to check. I didn't know what percentage was allowed. Now, how many of you have been on really good tours? How many of you have been on tours you just can't wait to get away from? It's an equal number. You know, someone made a comment this morning that's really relevant. I don't remember who said it, but that the bad, oh, it was Liz Shaddix, it's a bad tour, a tour that's not good, that you give has potentially pretty big ramifications, not only on people coming back to your site, but on going to other sites all around them. I was at AASLH, American Association for State and Local History, a couple of years ago, and in talking to one of my colleagues there, who's a curator down in Georgia, she told me about a trip she'd taken, and she loves historic houses. She works in one. She loves to go to them. She went to this one house, and it was horrible. I mean, it was like a tour that would not end. And she said, I couldn't bear to go to any other tours. I mean, that really finished it for me. So while some people will say, will give you the impression of a bad tour, well, you know, it's not a big deal. It really is a big deal. So hopefully we're going to do some things that'll give you some ideas of how to do a better tour, reinforce some of the things you've done earlier. And if I've got a theme for this, it's connecting with visitors creates better experiences. And we're going to talk about ways to make those connections. We'll talk about some of the research that was done at Conner Prairie, some of the results of that, some techniques, and then talk about some of the research behind why personal connections are pretty powerful. Bad tours. I used to work at the Baltimore City Life Museum. One of the museums we operated was the Carroll Mansion. And I remember we would put a school group half in the Carroll Mansion and then half in the 1840 house, where we were doing some pretty powerful dynamic plays. Carroll Mansion, in a sense, became a holding pen. But I remember one school bus driver coming to me and saying, 2 o'clock, I've got to leave at 2 o'clock. I've got to get the kids out. So I told the tour guide and went on about my business. A little bit later, it was after 2, the tour bus driver came up to me and said, where are my kids? I said, I'll go get them. So I went up, he had them up on the 3rd floor of the Carroll Mansion with his back to them. You know, they're back here. He's talking. I took the kids away. He didn't even know. You know, his button had been pushed, and he was going to keep right on going until he finished. And then another project I did at the American Philosophical Society, where I was doing an evaluation of an exhibition they had there. It's down near Independence Hall in Philadelphia. One woman had a visitor come, and she literally had him cornered. He was like, his back was in the corner, she was in front of him, and it was clear he wanted to leave. And when he finally left, she said, I know he wanted to leave, but I just had more stuff I had to tell him. So, do any of you do that? All right, but I do want to give you an example. Now, Conner Prairie is a large living history site just north of Indianapolis. It's one of the major ones in the country. It has a kind of a recreated composite 1836 village. It's also had a Civil War interpretation this past year. And they've changed their name, so I think it's Conner Prairie Adventure Park. Or anyway.
Interactive History Center.
That's it, Interactive History Center, thanks. I used to work there years ago, and so I remember the training you would go through. The training would be lecture, 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 an hour on learning styles, lecture, 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 and then you follow somebody around. So they really didn't give you much information about actually how to do your craft of interpretation. They assumed that we kind of, through osmosis, you'd be able to do it. Well, several years ago, the director of Conner Prairie, I think it was John Herbst at that time, or Ellen Rosenthal, who came right after him, anyway, said, I wonder what really happens out on the site. What do people go through? People say living history is great, but what happens? So they mic'd some families coming through, and they found some pretty amazing things. I'd like to give you a sample of one of the things they found. This is where I get to my problem. I do have a theater background. You gotta go problem. So the visitors come up to the station, which was the Golden Eagle Tavern, and the interpreter says, now I haven't accomplished it with me, well, you got any questions about school or anything?
Yeah, I was wondering how you can afford to eat if you only make 3 cents a day.
Ma'am, I got a farm outside of town, and you see most of the children, a lot of them, don't even have 3 cents a day. So what I do is take items to trade, see for education, so they can bring me in, just like now. Berries will be coming along pretty soon, so they can bring me in a pie. Something like that, I'll wait until next fall and say, let's see, they brought me in 3 pies, they brought me in a cobble, they brought me in maybe some candles or some beeswax, then that way I can let them go to school next fall. Things like that. Of course, see, things I don't need, I take them to go to the store, Whitaker store over there, because see, Mr. Whitaker, most of us folks around here, what we have to do is we have to do a line of credit with him at the store every year. And that's what kind of work Rock's going to do. We're going to buy them off at the end of the year, and so we'll get a line of credit and buy things that we need. So when they bring me in things, I can't use to take them over there. I trade them into him, and he introduces them out. That way, I can get the boys and girls education. And still get some things I need, maybe more things too. That's only part of it. And of course, he didn't say it that fast. And what they found out that was happening a lot. And so when visitors would leave that spot, that station, and as an interpreter, you had like 6 interpretive goals at each station. If you were to get across in 6.5 minutes and send them on their way. So that person was probably doing their job. But what they found out happened was that quickly kids lost interest in what was going on. When the kids lost interest, it pulled the parents' attention away. And so when they left that spot, what did they talk about? Where are we going to eat? Where are we going to go next? Where's the bathroom? Or the adult might interpret what the interpreter had just said, which seems, wait a minute, why is that going on? So they realized they had to do something, that they couldn't continue on in that way. So what they ultimately did, we'll touch on just a very few of those things, they set up a new training program, which was 1/3 content, 1/3 interactive techniques, 1/3 site safety and logistics. So before it had been 95% content. So that was a major change in and of itself. Go ahead and flip it. This is what that looks like on the screen. And I've seen, they have other transcripts that are they're even longer than this. So as a visitor, you can imagine, it's awful. We'll go to the next one. So some of the key findings, just a second, excuse me, I'm going to turn on my timer. Just set up it. What they found were that learning indicators were usually absent when the interpreter engaged in the monologue. There was just no indication that they was learning anything at all. But they occurred most frequently after an interpreter engaged a family in discussion. And they discovered that because there were some interpreters that did a wonderful job. I mean, they really targeted in on the children, they brought the parents into the conversation, and basically what they had was kind of a 3-way interaction. Now that wasn't everybody, that was just a few places. And go to the next one. And the impetus for that active engagement came from the interpreters. It didn't come from the visitors. It didn't come from waiting around for the visitors to ask you the appropriate questions. It was a much more proactive approach by the interpreters, which elicited the kind of responses they wanted. And the interpreter's role in stimulating the conversation was just crucial. So I want to go ahead and go to the next one. I'd like to do this little activity, which is sort of a follow-up of what we were doing this morning. I'd like you to pair up, but you may find you don't need to talk to your partner, but go ahead and find someone to be a pair. And I want you to write out 3 different questions that might follow that afternoon that might help you find some insight into what your visitor's interests are. And then pick one of those questions and give 3 possible answers you might get to that question. And then based on those answers, what would you say next if you can focus in on what you're interested in? So this is very site-specific. This is not general, but it's specific to your site. So again, try to think of 3 questions that follow good afternoon. Pick one that you wrote and give 3 possible answers someone might give. And then, based on that, make a note as to what you would want to focus on next at your site, go upon their interest. If you want to talk about it with someone, this is your favorite, go ahead. Go ahead and pair it up if it helps.